All right, Alexander, let's do the Q&A from our live stream with Gonzalo. And let's just jump right into it. We have a good amount of questions, but I think we should be able to move through this fairly quickly. And thank you to everyone that sent us super chats or questions via Odyssey, Rumble, YouTube, and our great locals community. David S. sends us a super sticker, and Lilia sends us a super sticker as well. And Mona L says, congrats, 200,000 subs and counting. Thank you very much for that, Mona. Thank you, Valley S, for that super chat. Thank you, Chun Ling, for that super sticker. And thank you, Celso Legra, for that super chat, which says, Adoso Brain Food. Good morning. And Commando Crossfire's super chat says, if the opposition disarms, well and good. If it refuses to disarm, we shall disarm it ourselves. That's from Commando Crossfire. And Dominique's super chat says, suppression of a lecture on Dostoevsky, a concert by Berezovsky, change of title of a work by Degas, theft of a work of art. What happens to us? Is it worthy of the Red Guards? The West is dishonored. What do you make
It's
of
far
that?
worse than you're talking about the Red Guards. You're talking about the Chinese Red Guards in the Cultural Revolution. Then, of course, it is absolutely at that level. It is appalling, and but does it surprise you? I mean, go back to 2020 during the period of the protests in the United States. I'm even now nervous about identifying what those protests were about. But we all remember how it all started with an incident with a man and a policeman, and how it spread across every city in the United States, and how statues were pulled down and things of that kind. Well, given that this is the zeitgeist at the moment, we turn on everything that's associated with a culture or civilization or a country or a ethnicity or a color that we don't like. Why should we be surprised at this? Why should we be surprised that a painting by Degas has its name changed to something different from the one he gave it?
Yeah,
By the way,
agreed.
on the subject of
Yeah,
that painting, when I told my wife about it, she's an academic, she refused to believe it. She thought it was so incredible that she just couldn't believe that it had happened. Well, it has.
well, painted before Ukraine was even a country, which is the odd part about
Well, I
it.
mean, I doubt that very many people in France, when Degas painted that painting, even had heard of the word Ukraine.
Exactly. Jay Hoden, thank you for that super chat. TT, thank you for that super sticker. And Commander Crossfire says, can Canada help reduce the West's dependence on Russian energy? We have lots of oil, gas, etc., and the people here are generally neoliberal imperialists.
I'm sure it can, and I mean, I think it can help, especially the United States. I'm not sure that it can make much difference to the situation in Europe, if I have to be straightforward about it. But of course, the problem is not that Canada can't provide this. I mean, there's two things to say. Firstly, there's a logistical operation. You have to start gearing up, building pipelines, drilling wells, doing all those sort of things. But the second thing, and I think this is and that takes time. But the second thing is a political stroke ideological one, which is that for Biden to agree to all of that happening, to say lift to change the stance on the Keystone Pipeline, would be like admitting that Donald Trump was right. And I think he finds that politically incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah. Sanjeva says, God bless you, Gonzalo. Is there anything we can do to make your life better? Stay safe. Gonzalo actually I put that super chat on the stream, so I'm
Yeah.
sure Gonzalo read that. Thank you very much,
I
Sanjeva,
know
for
that
that.
he's very
Yeah.
grateful for all those words
Yes.
of support that he gets, by the way. I know that he is.
Absolutely. And Raul says, Gonzalo, stay safe. Our prayers are with you and your family. Be blessed. Thank you for that, Raul. Matlis says, where is Viktor Medvedchuk? Did the Ukrainians kill him or did the Russians rescue him?
I'm sure it was the second. That's I'm absolutely sure it was the second. I can't obviously confirm that, but I wouldn't be surprised. And I'm wildly speculating now, but he is a very, very important man, and potentially, if there's going to be a political settlement in Ukraine, an even more important person from a Russian point of view. that, one of the reasons why the Russians felt that withdrawing from Ukraine, from near Kiev, was something that they could do, was because one of the objectives of that operation of moving troops close to Kiev was to get close to Medvedchuk in order to spring him. And I'm sure that's what happened.
Exactly. Possum Power says, what are your thoughts on the threats by the Baltic states to blockade Kaliningrad? We actually talked about this during the stream.
We've talked about it,
But
yeah.
real quick, Alexander, I
Well,
think you said
briefly,
that
I mean, if we
Kaliningrad's
No,
armed to the teeth.
armed to the teeth, absolutely. I mean, I think that would be an insane thing to do, and I think that the Pentagon knows it. I'm hoping that they won't happen, but we're in such deranged times that anything is possible now.
Matlis X says, is there any incentive for these credit rating agencies to officially call Russia in default? Wouldn't that then trigger the credit default swaps and other derivatives? From my understanding, default is a legal term.
It certainly is. And I'm afraid there are lots of reasons why they shouldn't do it, and very good legal reasons why they don't need to do it. Nonetheless, because we are not following reason and logic anymore, certainly not legal logic, I fully expect that they will do it, because to do otherwise, again, would contradict the entire flow of policy that we see coming from the government of the United States. And my own personal view about the credit rating agencies, by the way, is that the sooner they're abolished, the better. I think that they become an instrument of US foreign policy, and anybody who takes them seriously as objective agencies, well, I have a bridge to sell you.
Yeah, I agree. Summer of 1970, thank you for that super sticker. And Commander Crossfire says, could there come a point when Russia demands repayment of their seized assets and reserves, refuse to continue supplying energy after contracts end?
I'm sure there is. I'm sure they will. I mean, it's only a question of time. The question is how long.
Yeah.
I don't think they will do it now. I think they will get through their present problems, aim to sort out the situation in Ukraine, then they'll seek a pause, and then at some point they'll start taking whatever measures they think they should. But I'm going to say something else. By that time, I also expect all that money will have been taken out of the reserves and handed out to all sorts of people. So it will be a case of seeking compensation rather than recovering the money.
Nick Mastilovich says, well done, and thank you for your work. Thank you, Nick, for that. And Elena Diaz says, what can Russia do to recoup their stolen art by Finland? Even I'm getting pissed watching all this privacy against Russia. Actually, I have an update on that, Alexander. Finland said they're going to work to give it back. The pressure was too much.
Yes.
They're going to work to give it back.
I agree, yeah.
They've come out with those statements.
That,
I read those this
that
morning.
that is good to hear. That is good to hear.
Mitt P says, what an extremely intelligent move by Germany. They seized the TAP while the tanks are in Russia.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Sanjiva says, one of two super chats. My wife, who was born in Russia, but as westernized as you can get, has been always virulently anti-Putin. I heard for the first time ever uttering words describing support for a powerful Russia. And let me find the second part of that. 1 second, Alexander. It's somewhere up here, if I can find it. And it seems that I can't find it.
Okay. Well, I'll just say about that
yeah,
I've noticed the same swing. I mean, I have Russian friends in London, and they have been shocked by the general mood, here, and they're also swinging in the same direction as your wife. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, I found it. Now I found it. What's pushed her to this position is Russophobia among the Western elite. Russians are much more sophisticated than the West imagines. The West has very poor human intelligence in Russia, and it shows by their ignorance.
I completely agree. If the West had been far more intelligent, the correct way for them to have responded to this crisis was not to impose sanctions. Instead, to crank up their publicity campaign and to start telling people in Russia, your government is doing terrible things there. There would have been a lot of Russians at that point there would have been some Russians who would have listened and you'd have started to open up the cracks within Russian society. Instead, by going all out for this extraordinary sanctions war, they did the opposite. They consolidated Russian society. And as Alex and I have discussed in another program, which is going to come up soon, well, another program which will maybe up, what they've actually done is they've actually triggered criticism in Russia of Putin because he is too soft. So, I mean, they've done the exact opposite, the diametric opposite of what I think they'd imagined they would achieve.
Yeah. Elena says Germany arming combined with economic hardships plus German government failing to condemn NAZIs. Is it just me getting nervous?
Well, no, you're not the only person who's getting nervous. And again, we've done a major program about this in which we've discussed, Alex and I, how the next couple of months are going to become extremely dangerous because, in my opinion, the situation in Donbass now clearly shows a major military disaster unfolding for Ukraine and for the West. The Western powers have now started to understand that their economic war against Russia is failing. And on the contrary, it's causing major problems within their own economies and societies. Now, these people, as we said many times, have no reverse gear. And from their point of view, also, they cannot accept failure because the political careers of so many people in the West is now invested in the success of this operation that they launched at the end of February, the economic war and all that. So what do? And the risk is that they're going to escalate, and they can escalate to the most dangerous places. So I absolutely share your nervousness and your concern.
Yeah. Rocker Unu, thank you for that super sticker. Frank, thank you for that super chat. Donna says, thank you for all that you do. How do you all maintain your sanity in this clown world that we live in?
Not easy.
Not
easy at all. But we talk to each other. We communicate with you. I mean, the fact that we have to come and do programs about this and we have live streams and we field questions, helps us immensely. It makes it all worthwhile, and it also keeps us grounded. At least that's what I feel.
Yeah. Kaliu25, thank you for that super sticker. Toy Chung, thank you for that super chat. Mitt P says, German and EU industries head for collapse just to please their masters in the USA.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, Michael Hudson, by the way, the economist, has written a brilliant article about this. I mean, we talk about the EU committing economic harakiri. Michael Hudson goes and he's an economist. He knows all about this. He was the first person, by the way, who understood way back in the 70s the implications of the petrodollar. Anyway, he's actually done a really interesting piece in which he's analysed and explained it and explained what the Europeans have done to themselves. Some European leaders understand this. Others are still intoxicated, and others both understand it and are intoxicated and are becoming increasingly fearful. So when you are faced with these situations, as I said before, the risk is you don't back off, you escalate.
Yeah. Charles, thank you for that super sticker. Commander Crossfire says, do you think something could push Russia to full out American style shock and awe, more retaliation against Russian sympathizers, like in what happened in that town in Kiev? People know what I'm talking about, that village in Kiev, sorry. More and more weapons from the West. Negotiations are dead.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the negotiations because, I think we did a very good set of analyses last week of the negotiations in Istanbul and of the fact that Ukraine made major concessions, even though the spin in the Western media, particularly an article in the Financial Times, gave everybody to think otherwise. And the dreadful, absolutely awful Russian media operation, or rather PR operation by the Russian government, actually assisted that spin. But it was in fact the Ukrainians who made all the big concessions, and they were very big concessions. Lavrov says that they've now retracted them. They've taken them all back because, they've been told to do so by Washington and London. So, it is impossible to see how this negotiation is going to succeed. I mean, it's one step forward, and then with the next moment, it's another step back. So it looks to me as if sooner or later, and I think we're actually seeing it now. I think the Russians are hardening because I think they're coming to realize that negotiations with the Zelensky government are impossible. They will never achieve the outcome that the Russians want, and that the only way they can do that is by seeing this operation through to its conclusion. Lavrov said so. He said either Ukraine comes to terms or this operation goes on until it achieves its political objectives. And Peskov, Putin's utterly incompetent spokesman, tried to say the same thing in a disastrous interview he gave to Sky News, and the result was that he mangled it and failed to make clear what he was saying.
Herding Cats says, good morning from Montreal. Can you suggest other independent war reporters on the ground like Patrick Lancaster and Anne-Laurie Bonnell?
Well, there's Gonzalo.
Eva Bartlett is who
Lira.
I can suggest.
Eva.
Gonzalo, Gonzalo, I mean Gonzalo Lira, but if you're looking for like someone like in Donbass, Eva Bartlett's in Donbass. I know that.
Eva Bartlett, yeah.
She's like doing shows from there. But I can't think of anybody else. Do you know anyone that's doing something
Western media
like what Patrick is doing?
No, I don't know anybody. I mean, the Western media keeps very clear of this. There was an interesting piece in the BBC. I mentioned this, and I'm going to give a little credit here to the BBC. They sent one of their reporters to Donbass, and he went to one of these cities. I think it was Lysychysk. I'm sorry, I'm not getting the name of the town right. But anyway, he met a large group of civilians in a bunker somewhere who, hiding from the shelling. And he got into a discussion with them about who they thought was responsible for the war. And he made clear his astonishment that they blamed Zelensky and the Ukrainian government rather than Putin and the Russians. Now, that appeared on the BBC. So all credit to the BBC for publishing that report. Don't think it was there for very long, though. But anyway, there it was. But Western journalists avoid the Donbass. They don't report from it very much. They leave it to the Ukrainians to do it for them. And I'm afraid there's not that many journalists on the other side, Western journalists, that we can all tap into. Of course, there's huge amounts from the Russians, but you've always got to remember that this is the Russians, and of course they too are a party to the conflict. So it's the people that Alex said. Can I just say I think Patrick is a heroic journalist, and I follow. Obviously I follow what he says, and I think he does an amazing job, and I like him. I think he comes across as a wonderful human being as well.
Very personable. We the Captain Now says, your Russia-Ukraine analysis is the best on the web. Thank you for breaking through the conditioning. Thank you for that. Super chat. RDDR says, Ukraine's 1989 degenerated as it moved from attacking a Soviet elite to a Soviet people. I see many excuses calling the latter an imported population.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right, actually. I mean, I've seen some terrible things being said in Ukraine, some very disturbing and frightening things said in Ukraine. And of course, they've led directly to the situation that we have today. That is a topic, perhaps one day, for a full discussion, but one which we would have to undertake, I think, on one of our platforms, locals perhaps.
Yeah. Karen, thank you for that super sticker. Tim, thank you for that super sticker. Fragile says, what do you think about Scott Ritter being banned on Twitter for exposing the concerns about certain things? They let him back in to Twitter, actually.
No, let him back in.
I think he should stick to
to
Telegram. Yeah, they had to. Yeah.
I think he should as well. I mean,
I agree.
They will come to him very quickly. All I will say is it was done on the basis that he'd harassed someone. And I saw the tweet, and as far as I could see, the person he was supposed to have been harassing was the President of the United States, because he was the person who was mentioned there. So, I mean, I found that a very odd explanation that Twitter gave. But, we know that Twitter will give whatever reason it considers, wants to do whatever it wants. But anyway, there was such an outcry, and all, congratulations to Scott for getting his Twitter thing unsuspended. But he should follow Alex's advice and go on to Telegram.
Yeah. RDDR says our policy with Russia isn't explained by IR realists or liberal views. This is more like Huntington's Clash of Civilizations, but with a liberal makeover.
I think there's a lot in that, actually, except, of course, Huntington would have been appalled by this war. I mean, I never knew him, by the way. I mean, obviously not. But because I have connections in the academic world, and because once upon a time I did a history degree, and still take a big interest in history, and I do know people who have known him, and he was a serious historian and a serious scholar, and somebody who I know in Russia was taken fairly seriously, and I think he would have been very, very opposed to this whole situation that we see today, even though he was an American patriot to his fingertips.
Istvan says, I see you only have 200,000 subs. Patience, you will soon have 1 million. It will be fun to watch you answer their questions. Well done to you guys. Thank you very much for that super chat. Jennifer Chang, thank you for that awesome super sticker. Mit P says, Chinese companies have started purchasing coal and oil in Russia for yuan. China will nullify the sanctions by the collective West. Very true.
I agree. I think that's what's going to happen. I think the other country is going to nullify the sanctions by the collective West is Russia itself. Mishustin, who's the prime minister, gave an address to the Russian government. He said, that he expected that within 6 months to a year, the major gaps that have been created by the pullout of many of these companies will have been largely resolved, and the Russians will be able to stabilize the problems in their domestic economy. Many of these things are not very complicated. I mean, there's a shortage of paper at the moment, apparently, because, some of the dyes that are used to make the paper white, apparently, they were being imported from the West and things of this kind. These are not complicated or technologically challenging things, and there are always people in Russia who will do that. The big gap, the big industrial gap, the two big industrial gaps. One is microprocessors. We've discussed this many times. Russia makes its own microprocessors. I'm sure they'll be able to crank up production, but that may take a while. And the other is aircraft. Obviously, they've got their Airbus and Boeing fleets that they basically confiscated, and that will operate. Then they've found some solution, they say, to the spare parts problem. And they're cranking up production of their old Tu-214 and Ilyushin 96 aircraft. By the way, I've flown in both of them, and they're fine. They're pretty good aircraft, but they're a bit old. They date from the 1980s. That was when they were launched. Of course, there's Boeing 747s, which are older still. But anyway, these are fairly old designs, but they will do for the time being. They'll get more designs coming up soon, but that will take time. Sorting out all the problems in the aerospace industry, that is going to take longer.
Eric, thank you for that super sticker. Sparky says Kamala changed her sponsor from Hillary to Obama. Well said, Sparky. Brendan says, Gonzalo, please mute when eating and drinking. Stay safe. God bless. Thank you, Brendan, for that. Ricardo BR says, please contact Duplo Espresso channel on YT about Brazil. Brazil has been destroyed. It's not ready for the next commodity circle. Super cycle.
Yeah. I'm in contact, I should say, with a journalist from Brazil. In fact, I did a program with her, which I should be getting a copy of. It was been translated into Portuguese, and all kinds of things have been done for it. So that should be coming. I should be providing details of it to us soon. But I'm hoping that we will be able to develop a good bridge to Brazil, which is an extraordinary country, an amazing country, one which has, however, had many problems, and where one hopes that one day they'll make that great breakthrough, which always seems to stand in their way somehow, which is, I think, political problems. I'm afraid she seems to think as you do, that this time Brazil will not be able to surf the commodity super cycle in the way that it did before, when Lula da Silva was president. And that's not, by the way, to say that Lula was, the great genius or anything like that. It's just that by that point, Brazil had sorted a lot of things out So it was able to surf the wave. This time it won't be.
Sari, thank you for that super sticker. Moonbeam says, at least it has been fun to watch neocons get smashed up on Indian crosstalk shows.
I know.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Thank you very much for that. Moonbeams. Kurt says,
They
"Mix
got
me up
India.
blue-"
They've got India. Just to say, they got India completely wrong. You know, they listen too much to their friends in the Mumbai business community, and they didn't understand that they're only one. Those people are an influential voice in India, but far from being the only one. And they didn't understand what a complex, sophisticated society India is.
All right. Kurt says, it makes me absolutely sick to my stomach to see all the Russian diplomats who are getting expelled when we are more than ever in need of diplomacy, not less. Very
So true. The last thing you want to do is expel diplomats. You need more of them, not less. By the way, Peskov, whom I did, I've said bad things about, but he did point out, there will come a point when the Russians will simply conclude that it's better to just break diplomatic relations with some European countries, because realistically, if they don't have enough diplomats, what's the point in trying to keep embassies open? I think he was talking about Britain, by the way.
Marcos 588 says the sprinkling of Azov diehards among the whole Ukrainian army is similar to the use of NKVD political commissars in the Soviet army during World War II.
I'm sure that's where they got the idea from, by the way. And the Soviets also had blocking battalions, also from the NKVD, to prevent people retreating, all those things. So I'm sure the Ukrainians got their ideas from all of that, even though, of course, they will never admit it.
Yura Gabor says no referendum in Finland over NATO. The EU sanctions Hungary. New law in Hungary permits the country to leave both without having a referendum. Two can play the game. The thorn is what the thorn does.
Absolutely. I think that is, I'm not going to add anything to that. I think that point is so well made. I really don't have anything to say.
Lenta, thank you for that super sticker. Jane, thank you for that super sticker. Darlene, thank you for that super sticker. And Radovid, thank you for one more super sticker. And Vincent says, the Western powers can do what they do, and I will never hate the Ukrainians or the Russian people. Never forget the good they have given us. Well said.
Absolutely.
Well said.
So true. So
Mobius,
absolutely profoundly true.
Mobius Zero says, your thoughts on North Korea's recent actions and possible upcoming nuclear test.
Well, we're so focused on Ukraine that, we're losing sight with North Korea. There was a way forward to deal with North Korea, and that was, and I'm sorry to say this again, I know people get very angry whenever I bring up his name. Some people get very angry. But Donald Trump, in my opinion, had the right idea, which is to negotiate with Kim Jong-un. Nothing else has worked. And Kim Jong-un, be absolutely clear about this, is one of the big winners from this Ukraine crisis. Because if the Russians now start to do that which they have not done before, which is to supply him with oil and to build gas pipelines, what is the West going to do? Sanction them?
Yeah, nothing. Yeah, Jeffrey, thank you for that super sticker. And Karen, thank you for that super sticker.
Just quickly, just to finish with North Korea, I mean, the Russians have already made clear that they think the sanctions against North Korea have gone too far and ought to be reversed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you for those super stickers. And Robert says, why is the West still insisting on Ukraine repaying its national debt while at the same time calling for more funds from Western societies?
Because it's the way that you recycle funds. You've got to understand about Ukraine. Ukraine is a laundry. You put money in, the money comes straight out. It doesn't stay in Ukraine. Well, some of it does, but of course, even the money that goes in Ukraine, stays in Ukraine, goes into bank accounts in, the Caribbean islands, in Switzerland, in Luxembourg, in Liechtenstein, in all those sorts of places. So that's why this goes on in Ukraine. You don't want to stop that. That would make certain people in Washington and Brussels and wherever extremely unhappy. And not to mention London, of course, which is probably the centre of the whole thing.
Brian says, is it true that Kiev is now proposing that Crimea and Donbass should be discussed at a meeting between Zelensky and Putin, which is never going to happen?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what they've done. In the previous meeting in Istanbul, they appeared to say that Crimea, the status of Crimea and Donbass would be decided after 15 years, but that those two territories would not be covered by the security guarantees that Ukraine was seeking. So they were differentiating Crimea and Donbass from the rest of Ukraine. Now they pulled back on that, and they've said that this status should be discussed when Putin and Zelensky meet, and the Russians have said that is completely unacceptable.
DJC says, Smoking Eagle was asking this week about reports of Russians being poisoned around Kharkiv. We thought maybe Gonzalo might know about it.
I don't know. Maybe something he does know.
I think it's the chemical
wouldn't
weapons.
take-
That story about
Oh, that's right,
not
yeah,
the
that
chemical
story
weapons.
about
They hit some sort of
tank
factory.
factory, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I've heard, that is certainly true. But it's an industrial plant with smoke and things of this kind, and it may have been done on purpose or not. I mean, I'm not going to say one way or the other, and it is causing problems and health risks in the area. I suspect the Russians will get it under control.
Madigna Cross says, would love to see the Duran host a China expert, preferably Chinese, on the current show.
That is a very good idea. In fact, I know one China expert who's very good. I don't think he knows much about the Ukraine thing, though, or what the Chinese would be thinking about that, and he's English, but he might be able to suggest someone. Anyway, look, it's something Alex and I will get into a huddle and talk about, and at some point we will do what we can. But please, please, please do all remember, that setting up these programs with people like Scott Ritter and whatever, requires a lot of preparation. So don't be too disappointed if it doesn't happen immediately.
Yeah. Ruby Reed said, I came across an interesting assertion about Russian strategic objectives that would be keen on hearing your thoughts. Objective 1, to ensure water access for farmlands in the steppe zone in eastern Ukraine. Objective 2, seize control of massive gas fields in Yuzivska to maintain gas dominance in the region. And Objective 3, to control port cities as strategic assets. These points lend strength to Ritter's observation of Kiev offensive as a feint.
I think all of that
all
is
good points.
entirely plausible, but I mean, what do I know? I mean, these are the sort of things that are probably being talked about in the Kremlin and in and the general staff and in the economics ministries in Moscow. They're not going to share that kind of information with us. So I think there's a very plausible, it makes complete sense and is entirely plausible, but I can't confirm it one way or the other.
Jose Pardini says, how's the U.S. paying for the Russian oil? Are they paying for dollars, which they'll then just confiscate? Good question.
That's a very, very, very good question. I don't know is the answer. I presume they are.
So,
Bear in mind that only a proportion of Russian banks, only a minority of Russian banks actually, have been sanctioned so far. So, we could pay in dollars.
Zakharieva says, Russia is warning about possible explosion of the chemical substances, Khorasan factory in Kharkov, by the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Focus with the intent to put this on the Russians. Gonzalo, please take care. That's
Yeah, I know. I've heard
that's what we were talking about. How many army supplies has Europe sent to Ukraine? In our Russian programs, it was said that the Russians had missiles to strike every 30 days nonstop. Now, I don't believe that's true. It may be propaganda to calm Russian people, but Russian propagandists seem quite sure of this.
Well, I get to make a simple observation. I'm sure Alex saw the point that was made in a thread in a place which we're not going to identify, but the BBC said on the 22nd of March, that Russia had military supplies only left for only three days more of war. That was on the 22nd of March. So they should have run out by the 25th of March. And here we are, and it's April, well into April now, and they're still launching strikes and missiles everywhere in every direction. And in fact, the number is increasing. I don't think the Russians are anywhere close to running out, and I think they've probably got smooth production line operating, and I think they can keep this up pretty much indefinitely.
Then said he says, Flinch, that's Steve Flinch says, one way Macron could lose is by only coming third in the first run. Both Le Pen and Mélenchon are soaring. One is to the right, one is to the left of Macron. That is much harder to manipulate than the final one-on-one. I know it's a small chance, but it would be glorious with Macron taken out in the first round.
It would be an astonishing thing. Now, I'm not going to make any predictions. I would ask people to crank down their expectations. I mean, this is France. If things like that were to happen in France, I mean, it would be a political earthquake that would be felt all over the world. So, precisely for that reason, I suspect that between now and Sunday, every stop will be pulled to prevent that happening. So don't get your expectations too high.
Yeah. Monkey 12 says, apparently there is 450 gigabytes of unreleased data from Hunter's laptop to be released imminently. We can only wonder what is stashed away in that.
I heard about that too. I've heard about that too. I'm going to say what I believe about this, which is that in previous programs, we've all essentially, Robert, Barnes, Alex, myself, we've all gone along with the view that this rather cynical view of this affair, that, it was ultimately more about putting pressure on Joe Biden, to keep him in line over the Ukraine issue. I'm starting to think that this is, if that was the original plan, it's running out of control, and that this is becoming a very real, serious danger for Biden. And to go back to our discussion with Gonzalo, and which Alex joined in with us at that point, I thought that moment when Barack Obama came along, he had this extraordinary connection with Kamala, and Joe is left glowering in the corner. Well, it did look to me as if Obama was anointing her as the president. And I wonder whether this business with the laptop isn't going to be one of the things that's going to, leverage Joe out. And I wonder whether we're now very close now to that particular point. It's interesting that Barack Obama has come out and made this public appearance at this point, because notice how silent he has been over the last few weeks.
Yep, they need a fall guy. You always need a fall guy. Yeah. The European Parliament, by a majority, this is from Chaplin, by a majority of 413 votes, supported a resolution calling for a complete and immediate embargo on imports of Russian energy resources, oil, gas, coal, and nuclear fuel.
Yeah, Turkey's voting for Christmas, as we say in Britain. I mean, it's no more than what you'd expect from the European Parliament. I mean, that's what they've always done. I mean, they are. I mean, if you wanted proof, if you wanted conclusive evidence that any idea of setting up a European superstate was an incredibly bad idea, the European Parliament provides it.
Yeah, exactly. And Monkey 12 says China has warned U.S. over Pelosi visit to Taiwan. U.S. seems to be on a mission to break all ties with Beijing. And then Pelosi got the coup, and she canceled it.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
Did you hear that story?
Which, of course, I'm sure is true. I'm sure Pelosi, despite all the precautions that she's taken, which I'm sure is extensive, got the coup, and that was why she didn't go. And I'm sure that, China's warnings had nothing to do with it. And I've got a nice bridge to sell you as well.
Brian T1 says the EU is in self-destruct mode. The war is cover for what the politicians are doing to their own countries.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
Surrounding Kaliningrad means we are all dead, according to Danish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't believe the Pentagon would allow it, actually.
Well, Carmen says that Russian internet says that in Kolosovka they have nukes. That's a small town in Kaliningrad.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Yeah. And that's everything.
That's it. Well, those are brilliant set of questions. Oh, those are brilliant live altogether, actually.
Yeah,
well,
fantastic questions. Fantastic live. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. We'll leave it there. Duran.locals.com. Take care.